Some random texts before we pick over the bones of what you have just heard. Tony says Lindsay Hoyle seems to have given up his current role as Speaker. Andrew says Stephen Flynn, brilliant again. Di says, why is Sunak so incapable of answering a question? Caroline asks a question I see every week, Why does PMQs have to be like this, James? Why can't they just talk to each other in a normal way rather than continually sneery tone with all the weird jeering noises in the background? I think that was Jonathan Gullis, actually, the weird jeering noises in the background. Chris points out, sigh, he writes, PMQs, and Sunak pressed the Corbyn button again. Tony says, what is Starmer playing at with these questions? He's making Sunak sound competent. Colin says, what an absolute waste of time that was. Just call an election already. And James says, since when did Keir Starmer become a comedian? That was cracking. As was her joke about give her one of my speeches in a children's hospital show and have I got news for you. You've met him, James. Has he had lessons or is this just him? Something you've picked up on in the relatively recent past, Natasha Clark.
Yeah, we've talked about this before, haven't we, James?
Keir Starmer has discovered his funny bones.
He is. I enjoyed both the opening remarks from him. Has he read it? I've got the only unsigned copy. Lovely.
A bit close to home, that, actually. That's a joke.
Yeah, exactly. Is there any copies of your book that are unsigned? Do they exist?
Not unsigned. No, not yet.
I'll pay you a tenner if I can find one of those in any bookshops. But yes, and I actually, to be fair, also thought that Rishi Sunak's retort obviously fired up the Tory benches, but also was quite funny as he spent a bit more time reading the Deputy Leader's tax advice. I thought that was quite funny. Again, it's clear after a couple of weeks off that everybody is a bit more fired up. I think we were a bit flat at the end of last term, weren't we? And everybody really needed a break. And now both of them, I think, have had their Weetabix again. But yes, Keir Starmer is absolutely enjoying being leader of the opposition and doing these Prime Minister's questions even more. And you can sort of see it and you hear it with the media interviews that many of them do from the front bench. They are very much, I think, expecting to win the next election now. There is obviously a risk that some of them do get a little bit arrogant about the whole thing. But I think that generally it comes across with Keir as more confident and I think a bit more statesman-like, but equally also a little bit more humanity. And Keir Starmer, I think, struggles to show that humanity sometimes. And when he is making some of these funny jokes, it is a little bit more of his human side. So I think it does work in this kind of setting.
And yet there wasn't much there. Did that work, that attempt to pin down, to make him make a pledge? That's a pre-election ploy. He's quite good at this, but it doesn't work well in the moment. We saw him setting a trap for Boris Johnson, which Boris Johnson ended up essentially being enmeshed in, although it wasn't technically what did for him in the end, the claims about parties at Downing Street and the rest of it. This is attempting to triangulate Sunak into a position where his election pledges would contradict something that Starmer had got him to say in Parliament about where the money was going to come from, I think, or something like that.
Yes, so he was trying to get him to say this. So Rishi Sunak has repeatedly said he wants to abolish national insurance completely. The Conservatives have not said where the money to pay for that is going to come from. Labour have rightly jumped on this issue because that's something that the Conservatives love to attack them about. It's one for them to poke a hole in. But yes, Rishi Sunak hasn't said what he'll do to fund it. He said it's a long-term ambition, but it is going to cost a lot of money if he's going to do it, £46 billion. And yes, so that was Keir Starmer trying to say, would you like to cut the NHS to pay for it? Would you like to cut pensions to pay for it? Or would you like to put taxes?
Because it will have to come from somewhere.
It's going to have to come from somewhere, of course.
And it will have to be one of those three things.
It doesn't have to be. It could be anything.
Probably, though. I mean, if you're looking at the kind of involved.
Yes, but he has said he wants to do it over a long time, and I imagine they won't need the money immediately to do so, and it will be something that they can do over a long period of time. They're obviously cutting it by just a percentage point each time, so it doesn't take too much to do so.
Maybe.
However, I think that it does resonate with voters as well. You've said you want to cut national insurance, and how are you going to pay for it? That's a lot. You get that a lot during election campaigns, especially when parties make unfunded promises. Keir Starmer's Labour Party are not going to make that mistake again. They did it obviously with the last Labour manifesto had a lot of spending pledges where they did not say how they were going to pay for it, and they got into a right muddle under Jeremy Corbyn about that, and I don't think that Keir Starmer wants to make that mistake again. We know that Labour want to fight on the issue of being credible on the economy, but yes, I don't think this trap to try and get Rishi Sunak to say where he is going to cut is going to work. But come when the manifesto does launch, he's absolutely right. If they do put it in their manifesto launch in any way, saying we are going to eventually abolish national insurance, they've absolutely got to say how they're going to do it, or Labour will rightly kick them for it.
I think it was, I've been reminded of this by a text, that the John Smith kept a copy of the 1992 Tory manifesto, and you kind of use it to hold the government hostage from the position of opposition. It's not quite the same tactic because I don't think Starmer's expecting to lose the election, but it's a sort of preemptive manifesto undermining, isn't it?
Yeah.
I tell you what's interesting, quite a few people picking up on the more desperate Sunak is, the quicker he reaches for Jeremy Corbyn. I don't think that's a hard and fast rule, but it's got something. They're both going into the general election, I think, successfully detaching themselves from their immediate predecessors. Sunak isn't really going to be held to account for much that Liz Truss did, and despite the best efforts of the Tories today, it was Trident and NATO. The commitment to Trident was in the 2019 manifesto. Sunak's really not fooling anyone except perhaps his own backbenchers. Starmer's not really going to be successfully allied with Jeremy Corbyn, not least because he's slung him out the Parliamentary Labour Party, but still they try.
Yeah, these attacks, we can say we see them on both sides,
yes,
don't
exactly.
we? We see both the Tories trying to attack Labour for Jeremy Corbyn and Labour trying to attack the Tories for Liz Truss. And I think that is one of the considerations that the Prime Minister, I'm told, is thinking about when he's thinking about whether to call an election. I was told by someone the other week that, yes, the longer we leave it, the more we can distance ourselves from Liz Truss and what happened. And I think that is a consideration.
Also,
so if he does go long,
the madder she gets, I would suggest. I mean, the more bonkers some of her pronouncements become, then the more distance. Because Sunak, for his faults, doesn't come across as crackers.
No, he doesn't. And he did say today, and he came out with lines which I don't think he's used for a while, saying that during the Tory leadership contest, he rightly, said that she would crash the economy, that we couldn't cut all these taxes in one go, just like she wanted to do. And he said, I was right then and I'm right now. So, I think he does, to be fair, have a fairly good argument on this. He said at the time he wasn't going to do it. He said he was going to be responsible on the economy. He said Liz Truss was going to be a disaster, and she absolutely proved to be. So he is bang to rights on that. And I don't think that the Labour argument that Liz Truss is very much still a part of thinking in government is not quite gonna wash.
It's mad though, isn't it? Because I've got to stop saying that. I've managed to get extraordinary out of my vocabulary this week, and I'm just describing everything as mad instead. But the people behind Sunak cheering were the people that essentially greased Liz Truss's passage to the leadership of the party.
True.
Even though he was the one saying, I know it went to the members. Didn't it go to the? It did go to the members. It's so hard to remember.
Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss went to the members, but Rishi Sunak round 2.
No, I know that didn't go to the members.
Did not.
But who got who won among the MPs? Did Sunak beat Truss or did Truss beat Sunak? Can you remember?
Gosh, that's a good question.
Did they vote? Did the MPs just have one vote each in the overall? But anyway, he was saying that, to the people who ended up voting for Liz Truss, this is all going to be insane. And now when he stands up and says, well, I said it was all going to be insane, all of the people behind him who voted for her are all whooping and cheering.
Exactly.
It's crazy. We don't talk about Stephen Flynn enough during this part of the week. It's entirely my fault.
We should.
But he's a very effective parliamentarian, and he highlights, I think, on a weekly basis, more effectively than his predecessor did. He highlights some of the grievances, I think, of Scottish nationalist SNP supporters. Rishi Sunak today probably didn't even notice that he essentially told the Scottish people what they want, in contradiction to the contribution of the man whose party governs Scotland. It was quite strange. Chick points this out. If Sunak seems to know what the Scottish people want, why doesn't he let us answer for ourselves?
Well, that's a good point, but I don't think anybody would argue that the Scottish people don't care about schools, hospitals, jobs and taxes as well, of course. And, there is an argument that, ironically, the SNP are in the same boat as the Conservatives. They've been in power for so long, and a lot of people are, sadly fed up with the way things are going in Scotland. And I imagine that the SNP won't do quite as well at this election as they did at the last, not least because of Nicola Sturgeon and the fallout over what happened with her last week. But yes, look, I'm very much not a proponent for a second referendum. I do agree with that argument that we've had a vote. It's time to move on. Same with Brexit. My penance. Sorry to say the B word.
So nothing. Nothing really landing there today. Do you not think it was a bit of a...
No, and he gave a very short one sentence answer saying absolutely we've already had a vote. It's not one for us. I don't.
But nothing really landing for Starmer either, or Sunak. I mean, it was all a score draw all round, wasn't it? Or a no score draw.
Yeah,
a no score draw.
I'm going to give it 0-0. I don't think. Well, apart from the two, I'll give 1 point to each for both of those funny jokes at the start. But that's about all the points I'm going to give. Though I don't think that Keir Starmer was successful in drawing him into a trap anywhere. But either did I think the things that Rishi Sunak wanted to highlight. Taxes, inflation's down. He's just handed pensioners a nice pay rise. Well, is it moving the polls, Prime Minister? Of course it's not.
No, nothing is.
So absolutely nothing is. They're throwing the kitchen sink at absolutely everything.
And missing.
It's not working.
I mean, you speak to these people. Is despair setting in yet?
It is amongst a lot of people, yeah. And I think even cabinet ministers, I think, are starting to realise that the dial is just not shifting.
I can't remember this happening previously. I think I presume it happened to John Major a bit.
I'm not old enough to remember.
No, I'm barely old enough to remember. Well, I'm plenty old enough to remember, but I wasn't paying that much attention at the time. But I think this far out from the election, the polls were not near where they are now.
And under Major, they did narrow ahead of the election.
Yes, exactly that.
And we were expecting them to narrow at some point, and they haven't done. So, yes, will we see them narrowing when we do get to an election? It's really hard to know because absolutely nothing the Conservatives are doing is really making any difference to these polls. So, yes.
Forgive my lack of gallantry, Natasha Clark, but you are old enough to remember who won among the MPs when it was Rishi Sunak versus Liz Truss.
No, I'm not. Clearly not.
I don't think age is your excuse.
So many leadership contests.
It was Rishi Sunak who got 137 votes from their parliamentary colleagues, and Liz Truss
so sorry.
landed
Mea culpa.
113. But that takes us back to the smoking vote and the future leadership contenders keeping a very close eye on the membership
exactly.
of
They're
the Tory
thinking
party
about
rather
what
than the parliamentary
next,
party.
For sure.
And there it is, I suppose. To take away from that, the two leaders are both probably going to be able to easily weather attempts to tar them with the reputation of their predecessors, which brings us to Angela Rayner, briefly. I enjoyed Matthew Parris's piece in the Times today, which I would agree with, but of course the front page of the Times and the front page of the Daily Mail trying to resurrect this story, even if it turns out to be a hill of beans or a lot of sound and fury signifying nothing. Anybody confused about why so much inflation and effort is being put into it got their answer today, because it allows Rishi Sunak just to throw it like a sort of like an animal in the zoo throwing excrement at the glass. He can just throw it across the House of Commons. It doesn't matter. And it gives his backbenchers something to cheer about.
Yeah, and I think it was, in fairness to him, I'm sort of glad he didn't go quite in as hard as Angela Rayner as some people may have expected him to do. So I think probably making a slight joke about it probably was the easier way to get around that subject of touching on it but not going too far into it, because Keir Starmer obviously had a response there saying it was a smear on a working class woman, and then he swiftly moved on. But Angela Rayner has taken the risk that Keir Starmer took over the Beergate curry row of, if I am found guilty, I will quit. And look, the revelations that are on the front page of the Times today, that this investigation into her affairs is slightly wider than we did think it was. There are lots of officers, according to the Times, 12 police officers working on this investigation. Whether it is a good use of taxpayers' money or not is a very, very different question. But, if she is found to have broken some rules, they're taking a big gamble, and Keir Starmer, to me, seemed pretty confident that he thinks that she's going to be completely exonerated. She looked quite comfortable there sitting next to him today.
Always that little remark. He was the director of public prosecution, so it's hard to imagine a CV better suited to reaching a conclusion on this kind of issue. But hey ho, never say never.